And to the big debate on the show this evening, the government today clarified that there is no plan to invoke anti-avoidance rules on all foreign investments routed through participatory notes. Finance Ministry sources say only funds that fail to meet 4 criteria will be taxed. Is this just an eyewash or an effective move? That's the debate on the show. And joining us, two special guests, Ketan Dalal from PwC and Sandeep Parekh, founder FinSec Law Advisors. Ketan, I want to kick this off with you. What was your own assessment? Do you think the clarification from the Finance Ministry really helped, or is it just a mere reiteration of what is the government's stated position?
Clearly, if you ask me, what has transpired today and what seems to have given the capital market some comfort is nothing but a reiteration of what is already there, and honestly it does not add anything in any tangible manner to bring clarity to the provisions, unfortunately.
Well, that is true. Most people are wondering why this and why, unfortunately, there is not much clarity. What do you make of the clarification so far in, Sandeep? And would you call it something that's been effective in its way out to reach out to investors?
No, so I think it's kind of, I see that as a very important step in terms of, for example, they've given comfort that participatory notes, which are actually completely offshore contracts, they're economic contracts, which have an underlying in Indian shares, are not really, they're not really abusive in nature in the first place. So I think that's a very good example of what would not be impacted by GAAR. And if they would kind of give a couple of more examples and say that this is not really a cause of concern for anybody not abusing treaty provisions, I think it will provide a lot of comfort. So I think they should kind of come out with, in fact, a formal statement saying that there's no cause of concern for people who are doing genuine stuff. Things like participatory notes are definitely not abusive contracts.
Ketan, just like Sandeep, do you think there's any comfort you take from the statement that P-note investors will not be targeted, or do you think that the kind of recovery the market staged was somewhat misplaced?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a motherhood statement, a very generic statement, and I think the market was, I'm not a capital markets person, but the market was probably just looking for something to perk it up. So I can't say anything more than that, but as I said, in tangible terms, there's nothing much that has emerged.
Right. Sandeep Parekh, even though GAAR may not be designed to tax P-notes, the fact remains that the scope of the law is such that it will end up taxing P-notes. Would you agree with that assessment?
If you look at the provisions, you know, the definition of transfer property, all these other provisions which have been defined, it's clearly very, very broad, and technically or theoretically it could bring in P-note, for instance. But my understanding of P-notes is they're genuine instruments, they're not abusive instruments, they're completely offshore transactions. The valuation is based on Indian securities, and to the extent Indian FIs are holding those shares, they may or may not invoke tax. But the P-notes per se are not abusive in nature, so I would not think that it should fall within, as a subjective proposition, I do not think that it should fall within the anti-abuse prohibition. So I think, and then I think those are the words which are coming from the ministry as well. So I think once that kind of comfort is provided, I think it will be, at least in this respect, it will go a long way.
Right. Sandeep Parekh, I'm not sure if a lot of the foreign investors are going to agree with that view, but let's talk about the 4 tests that have been referred to by the Finance Ministry. Ketan Dalal, I want to get you in here. How significant are these tests, and would you agree that foreign investors through the Mauritius route will fail the tests in any case?
Well, I can't say that it always will be so, but it is very difficult to imagine that, you know, especially given the subjectivity, Sandeep, that the taxpayer or the investor will be able to establish that he is not violating anything in any of those. I mean, remember, you know, if you are talking of Mauritius, remember that the government itself incentivized investment through the Mauritius route. It actually created a situation where the tax, not created, but it actually initiated the situation of the circular where the tax residency certificate was considered as the condition for granting the benefits. Now, whether that is justified, not justified, is not the issue. But as I said, the government was clearly the initiating party for that, in a manner of speaking. And therefore, to to sort of bring in these conditions is in a sense overriding that circular as it seems. So coming back to your question, Sandeep, is it likely that somebody will not violate any of these conditions? Unlikely. I mean, one can think of a situation where all the decision makers are sitting in Mauritius, there is a full-fledged office, etc., etc. Possible, but unlikely.
But Ketan, what could be the fallout of the whole crisis? At the end of the day, that's what we are seeing, right? Under pressure, FI is saying, well, India should learn its ways by which they can reach out to capital investors in a better way and not be so flip-flop about policies. I mean, what are the other ways?
FII, or for that matter private equity, actually having commercial substance in Singapore is higher. Yeah. Also remember that the provisions of the India-Singapore Treaty, while co-terminus with the Mauritius Treaty and also having the same capital gain exemption, the provisions in Singapore are slightly more stringent. But if you cross that hurdle and can establish that the main purpose was not tax avoidance, the remaining provisions are such that the possibility of claiming that capital gain exemption is greater. And especially because, as I said, the possibility of locating people to Singapore and having a proper office, commercial substance is greater, because obviously people are more willing to locate also to Singapore as opposed to Mauritius, given the economic opportunities there as well. So I think it's more possible, yes.
Sandeep, you think foreign investors will not increase their P-note book till such time this clarity emerges?
I think some of the clarity has come today, so I'm not sure it's going to be, people will still be on edge, because typically investors want 100% certainty, they don't want 98% certainty. So to that extent, yeah, and ultimately I think GAAR provisions should provide certainty in terms of, there has to be some more clarification instead of a very, very broad anti-abuse provision, which can extend to non-abusive provisions also, for instance, participatory notes. So I think if some more comfort comes from the government, I think it will go a long way in comforting genuine investors, whether they come into India or whether they're doing offshore contracts on Indian securities.